Welcome to JasonWhiskyWise. My name is Jason. Welcome to this whiskey review where today here on the channel we're going to be reviewing the whiskey from the Lakes Distillery, and it's the Lakes Whiskymakers Edition called the Colheita. So this is a sample I got sent back last year. I think it was sent to me on the 25th of the 8th, 20, so in August last year when it was released. And we're getting around to reviewing all the stuff now because I haven't had any time since last year. Now we're getting some time. I want to cover all the whiskies and just pretty much have a full sort of reference for all of you to see, because I don't think there's a full catalogue for all the different Lakes whiskies. So if you have missed any of the reviews that I'm going to feature for all the Lakes whiskies, I'll leave a link to the top corner, to a card, to a playlist for the Lakes whiskies, and you can check out all the reviews there. Now, Colheita is a very interesting name, and I hope I said that correctly. If I haven't, it's going to be quite a sad day. But Colheita means harvest, and I believe, to what I read, this is the exclusive use of grapes for a single crop used to create a tawny port. So it's very interesting because, again, this is a port cask, and many of you know I'm a big fan of port whiskies. So I'm going to be really critiquing this one because I love port cask whiskies. Now, in terms of the Whiskymakers editions, the whole series is different from the Whiskymakers Reserves, which I reviewed in the last 3 videos. This is a series where the whiskey maker, Dhaval Gandhi, goes a bit astray and doesn't use sherry casks, his sort of preferred house style, or his preferred style of cask. He wants to explore the use of different casks and see how they, influence the whiskey and how that creates a certain product. So it's going to be interesting to see, because this doesn't contain, to what I remember, no sherry casks are used in this whiskey at all. So let's get into my review style structure. Let's cut the talking. Let's get straight into the drinking. In terms of the ABV on this one, in terms of the age statement, it's a no age statement whiskey, bottled at an ABV of 52%. The cask maturation for this one is a combination of bourbon barrels and Colheita port casks. The distillery itself is the Lakes Distillery, and they are located in the Lake District here in England. Now, the price point on a full-size bottle of this one comes in here at about £60 to £65 here in the UK. Let me know what you guys, if you've seen this one in your local market, but I think it should be around about that, US dollars, pounds, euros, etc. Now, in terms of exclusivity of this whiskey, yes, it is an exclusive whiskey. It's limited to 5,400 bottles, and once those are finished, that is the end of this first release from this Whiskymakers editions. So, this was a release in 2020, as I mentioned probably in the beginning of the video. I got this one in August 20. So it was released in 2020. Maybe later on this year, in 2021, we'll see a second release in this series of the Whiskymakers editions. But these are all natural color, non-chill filtered, so you get all this goodness in this whiskey. So I'm excited. I'm a big fan of port cask. Let's see what we get on the nose of this whiskey. Into the nose. First things up on the nose for me, this one has a lot of these sort of darker fruits compared to the other ones which had red fruits. This one for me is dark berries, dark fruits. First thing up on the nose, it's like a, reminds me of a dark forest gatto, those dark cherries and that, dark chocolate in like a cake form. Bit of cream, but then those dark fruits are still there. And these are dark stewed fruits, and I'm getting, raisins, I'm getting a bit of dark plums. I'm even getting a slight hint of like a berry tea. Blackcurrant jam. And again, they're just all playing around, stewing in their own juices. These blackberries as well. Behind that though, you do get this little bit of a sweeter, citrusy character. And for me, the sweet citrus, I wanted to push towards lemon, but it's not as citrusy as a lemon. This is a bit more like an orange, sweet orange. I'm going towards a nectarine on the nose. Following from there though, it's going back into those sort of blackberries and blackcurrants. And this actually reminds me of a blackcurrant cheesecake where you've got a little dusting of that icing sugar over the top, adding that little bit of sweeter aroma. But it's like these different layers of vanilla, cheesecake, a nice creaminess to it on the nose, that biscuity base. And that, I don't know, it's like for me, it's like blackcurrants, blackberries on the top. Really nice. Nose, beautiful for this whiskey. But where port cask whiskies really matter is on the palate. So, into the palate. Slanger. My first impressions on the palate for this whiskey, for me, there is a nice sort of medium texture to it. It's not too light, but it's not as rich as, say, the Editions range. For me though, again, it's starting with a bit of a spice, a bit of a gingery heat. You can feel it warming as it goes down. And then you're accompanied by these wood spices again. You're getting a cinnamon bark, dried fruits, raisins, prunes, goji berries, even red licorice as it sort of finishes on the center of the palate. Maybe even a little bit of cranberries, which adds to that little bit of a drying aspect, which I'm finding on this. But that's about it for the palate. Not as complex as I would have thought it would have been, but there's definitely that gingery heat, which you feel in the palate and you feel as it goes down, and it does stay with you. So let's see what we have in store for the finish, and I'll give you my concluding notes on this Lakes Whiskymakers Edition Colheita. On the finish for this one, I feel the finish is rather a short medium. I don't feel it really hangs around as much as I personally like it to. For me, I'm getting, again, a lot of these red berries, red currants, and cranberries, and a little hint of that red licorice, again, from the palate. I'm getting them in the finish, but that spiciness is still holding itself on the sides and the tip of the tongue, which I feel is I don't know, it's pulling this whiskey down so ever so slightly. So for me though, I'll give you guys my score first, and then I'll explain to you guys what I think about this whiskey. So for me, I'm giving this one an 84 out of 100. For me, I don't feel this is the strongest whiskey in the Lakes portfolio, but my honest opinion. In terms of nose palate finish, the nose is beautiful, and that is, what I love in a port whiskey. But for me, the palate is a little bit too hot. You feel that on the top of your palate as it goes down, and the spiciness, along with that little bit of a dryness of that cranberry note that I found in this one, it really dries out your palate rather quickly. And on the finish, if the spice wasn't there on the actual palate, I think this whiskey would hold itself a lot more longer. But on the finish, again, it's very simple and it finishes rather quickly, and so that's why I gave it a short medium finish. Now, in terms of is it value for money, water and time, for me, I'm in a bit, again, I'm critiquing this one because I love port cask whiskies, but for me, this is an 84 out of 100. I just don't feel it's up to that level of being the same price as, say, the Whiskymakers Reserve number 1, number 3, number 4. I feel those are, in a different, they're much more impressive style of whiskey, and they're worth it. For me though, does it need water? Does it need time? In terms of water aspect, I highly recommend it. It does take out that spicy gingery heat from it. And also it tones down that little bit of that bitter, dry, sort of red currant, red berry, cranberry note on the palate. So it doesn't make it feel super dry. In terms of time though, I would highly, highly suggest give this whiskey a lot of time. It does need it. I tried this whiskey, as you can see from the sample, I tried it with short time, a little bit about 10-15 minutes of time, and then I gave one sample that I tried of this one, 30 minutes, as I went and did other things in the house, came back, and the whiskey was so much more better. This sample, I only gave it 10 minutes in the glass, and for me, after experiencing all those 3 different styles, I feel it does need a lot more time, and that's because it just needs to have that little bit of a mellowing out period where I feel it's a bit too intense. So yeah, 84 out of 100 is my opinion. I'm a big fan of port cask whiskies, but I feel this one just fell a little bit short for me. I just wish that spiciness wasn't as powerful, and that dryness as well didn't combine with it, so that pulled down the score for me quite a bit. But that's my honest opinion, 84 out of 100. Let me know what you guys think down below in the comment section if you've tried the Lakes Whiskymakers Edition Colheita. And I'll be interested to see what other Whiskymakers Editions Dalvo Ganley produces at the Lakes Distillery. Fingers crossed, we might see a Madeira, maybe some, interesting other casks in the future. But this has been me, JasonWhiskyWise. If you guys have enjoyed, drop it a thumbs up. Be sure to hit the subscribe button if you're new to the channel. I'll leave some other videos up on screen. It's been me, JasonWhiskyWise, and I'll catch you all for the next video. Sláinte.